Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gospel Tech Podcast. My name is Nathan Sutherland, and this podcast is dedicated to helping families love God and use tech. Today, we're going to be talking about 3 areas that gamers excel, things they do really, really well. And this is kind of gamers and nerds in a bigger picture. People who enjoy the fantastical, the imaginary, the extraordinary. You might even call it escape, capital E escape. We'll get to that. That group of individuals. In this last couple months, there have been anime shows that have gone viral around the US. That has spawned a lot of conversation. It's also caused a lot of people to check it out for themselves. We've seen this since I was a child with gaming expand, where you have 250 million gamers in the United States. They're not what we used to think about with gamers. I mean, we were talking about people, playing more than 20 hours a week. Like, you're a gamer if that's your kind of major way of finding enjoyment. But now, even if you're a board gamer, that used to mean maybe you're playing tabletop games like Dungeons and Dragons, or maybe you're playing more involved games with miniatures. But now, I mean, it's not just Monopoly or these more involved games. There's Settlers of Catan, and there's Ticket to Ride, and there's Carcassonne, and there's all of these, there's Outfoxed, and these games that can work all the way down to 3 and 4-year-olds and all the way up to 30 and 40-year-olds, and you can even play them together. So you have people that dabble, you have people that show up, but I want to talk about those who would be described in their own minds as, I am someone who is a gamer or a nerd or someone who enjoys fictional outlets for my imagination. And I want to talk about what we as a group, I am included in this, what we do really well, and 3 areas we actually really struggle. The focus of this is, how do we parent that? Because we're a quirky bunch to try to parent. Some of you are nerds, right? You have a very unique niche fascination, and you're really, really good at it. There are people who have niche interests, and that makes you a nerd about that thing. And that's true in a bigger picture. Like, you can be a nerd about fishing, but I'm using it in the colloquial term. 3 things we do well, 3 areas we struggle. Let me run through them real quick, and then we'll dive in. I would say the nerds, the people who allow themselves to be distracted by their imagination and allow themselves to be invested in that. We are excellent at experiencing wonder. We have a deep understanding of capital R reality, which you may not think that's true, but my argument is it's true, and you need to think about that when you're parenting your nerdy child. You're not just trying to cleanse them of their nerdiness, you're trying to direct it. And then third, we are less likely to be tied to the grind of this world because of our ability to see the greater reality. So those are the 3 benefits. The downsides for us, we have a difficult time mourning, M-O-U-R-N, mourning, feeling the sadness of those around us, especially when we use our fantasies and our escape, capital E escape, to actually escape. We say we need this for a recharge, so we lie to ourselves about well, this is just something I need because it helps me be level. And what we're actually saying sometimes is we sort of medicate with escapism, and we don't know how to process reality, and therefore we run away. And then third and finally, we struggle submitting to God, because we can make worlds where we are God, and we can make things happen on our terms and make things in our likeness, and we really like that. Be that the stories we write or the stories we consume, the games we play. We can find ourselves in a bit of an echo chamber. So we surround ourselves with people like us who like the same things, and we have our own language. Like, if regular people who don't know our nerd lore stand in the room with us, they'll get lost. In fact, this is even, in shows like Parks and Rec, Ben Wyatt, multiple times he'll say something offhanded that anyone who knows the Lord makes sense, and everyone in the room makes fun of him because nerd, no one knows what you're talking about. And that is true with us. We get these echo chambers to the point where everyone agrees, and we think this is normal, but it's actually our niche and our nerddom showing through, to the point where we may not have outside voices speaking in, and we find it very comfortable to run life our way and not to step into the hard parts of life. So let's go. You're parenting a young person who is what we might call a nerd. So what do we do here when we think about how to parent them well? I'm not going to address necessarily the content they should engage. We've talked about that. It applies the same it applies to music or games or anything else. They need to consume content that lines up with setting our mind on the Spirit, that creates good fruit in them and is appropriate, both age appropriate, but some things are not I'm just not old enough. There are some things that are just inappropriate. They celebrate bad things. Gamers, nerds, see fantastical worlds or science fiction worlds in the positive way, not the dystopian way, and they can experience wonder that is the exact same wonder that we should experience in this world, but we just struggle sometimes. Sometimes we struggle to be amazed at a sunrise or a sunset. And if you know any gamers, especially gamers my age who have watched graphics come along, those people know how to appreciate wonder. The reason growing up, video games were so astounding to many of us was what people were able to do. It's not that the graphics were as good as reality. They never were. That was well into adulthood when that happened. But we were able to be amazed, like, man, did you notice the way this thing in this game has happened? There was a designer behind it. We love the way they thought of doing it this way. And there are little details, like the way, you can make your sword make a slash in the wall. There are little details like the way the sparks fly off of someone's armor when they get hit. Those are the little details that gamers experience wonder at. Or when people read fantastical books, they love the little details, the little things you're like, man, that wasn't necessary for the plot. For those who are willing to read the Harry Potter series, that would be the any flavored jelly beans, right? When you make up a concept, you're like, oh, that actually could be done. Like it's a clever idea. It's a bummer to pick the earwax one. And like, it's just a throwaway. You move on to the rest of the story, but that idea then becomes part of reality. Like, we have those now, and they're gross. It's super fun to eat with your kids. But like those little pieces, I mean, the Jetsons invented the treadmill because someone had an idea of like running in place, and then we produced it in reality. And that's the beauty. There's wonder and amazement and creativity that comes within fantasy and sci-fi and fictional enjoyment, and our ability to experience wonder. You take those people and put them in real life, and they are still blown away by the amazing things in the world. When they're not, it's generally either they have part of our negative piece, our ability to be present, or we do a really bad job of explaining it to them. We just state random facts, and we don't give them the story. We don't give them the connection. We don't let them just keep pulling on that thread of like, man, how far does this go? If that creature's small and then this other creature's smaller, how small will they get? And what do those small creatures do? And how many of them live on my skin? And like that ability to be amazed at God's detail and God's design. And just like we're amazed when games are made well and there are little thoughtful pieces put into the game that just make you know, like someone enjoyed this. Like someone was having fun when they wrote this story or they made this game or they created this video. Someone was having fun when they were making our world and making us, and we were made to experience the joy of the Lord, which isn't just things going our way, but it's an actual contentment and purpose in everything that we do. Gamers, nerds are really good at this. It's also the other way, by the way. We're also very quick on picking up when people are just there for the cash. This is why people freak out when new sci-fi movies or new series come out in say a book series, and then you get to like the fifth book and you're like, no, because the wonder's gone. The amazement is gone. The relational connection of someone made in the image of God, bringing other people on this journey, it's over. And you can tell the same thing with video games. When the first game blew everyone's mind, and then it goes corporate, and they spend 6 times as much money making this game, and it's worse as a game. Graphics aren't worse. The sales will probably be fine, but as a game, it effectively loses its soul, if you will. We're excellent at wonder. You can celebrate this with your child and say these things out loud. I love the way you're amazed. These are talking points to your child. Hey, can you show me what's your favorite part of this game? What's the hardest part? What was the part you felt the most achievement for accomplishing when they're talking about their stories? What about the world do you like? What about that world reminds you of our world? Like what? Find those connections, because there are connections even if your young person doesn't realize it. The thing that draws them into these games is something God has wired your child for. It is a positive thing, and wonder is a positive thing. It's on amazement. We are to be absolutely dumbstruck by God. I mean, to say God is awesome is to say he's terrifying. Awe of God is not like, wow, he's neat, he's my wingman. It's God is terrifying. Like, I don't want to go to the mountain that I know God is on because I'm scared. You go, Moses. I don't want anything to do with him. Like, that is the awe of God that we should experience when we recognize how vast and how loving and how gracious he is. Similar to how many of us feel when we try to think about space and how the distance of space, when we try to think about eternity. Like, it breaks our brains, it makes us feel small, and often will bring a certain amount of, what would you say, solemnity to it. It's heavy, it's weighty. You're probably not going to dance to that fact, but like, it's still really cool. It's still very amazing. So we're good at experience wonder. The second thing that we are good at is reality with a capital R. And this comes back to what Professor Wolf taught me in my freshman year of college, is just because it isn't real doesn't mean it isn't true. And gamers and nerds are really good at this. We see the reality tie-ins of what is still true. Right is still right, even if it's happening in a fictional world. Treating people correctly is still correctly. I would say, and this is a bit of a hot take, so bear with me, but in 8th grade language arts, when I taught that for a decade, students would come across, Lewis's Paralandria or Out of the Silent Planet, or they'd come across The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and then they'd come across the Golden Compass series, which the author of that series said, I am making the atheist version, I'm paraphrasing here, but I'm making the atheist version of the Narnia series. Like, Aslan was God, and we're going to flip it all on its head. And he attempts to do kind of like a Herman Melville with Moby Dick. Like, I'm going to, by way of popular novel, I'm going to make an indictment of God. Like, I wouldn't tell you to go read The Golden Compass. I frankly think it was a little lazy, but like, I know people love those stories. Just keep in mind, like, we don't lose sight of right and wrong in that process just because you changed the words. Like, most fantasy readers have the mental flexibility to go, nope, like, that's still wrong, that's still right, no matter what you call it. Like, we're going to keep understanding that. And they apply that then to real life, which can make your child snarky. They have lots of big questions and lots of big ideas. And please withhold unhealthy fantasy and fictional books, which there are several. Or they're just not ready for it. Like, probably don't let your 12-year-old read Moby Dick. There's some very subtle, angry arguments against God in there. Great book, very well written, and a hoot and a half if you know what you're looking for. But probably not a good starting spot for a young child still developing his or her biblical worldview. So we understand reality, that God is good, that humans are broken, that unmitigated power ends poorly. Maybe it's magic. That anger, when used as a driving force, it turns and distorts our hearts and our motives, even when we try to do the right thing. I mean, this is what Star Wars is built around. Yeah, it borrows liberally from Buddhism, but not all of Buddhism. And at the end of the day, it would still say there's a good and a bad side. It just thinks they're balanced. It doesn't say there is no good or bad. Like, turns out getting glowing red eyes and murdering everyone in a village is still bad in the Star Wars universe. I mention that because we as adults love ourselves some reality with the lower R. We love the practical and the things in front of us and the things that can be proven. We like tangible, and we really don't like it. We feel a little out of control when our kids start getting interested in things that either we're not interested in, or in things that, well, can't be fit into a math problem. So just know that it is praiseworthy for your child to be amazed at games and at books, to be drawn into wonder, and to see our world more sharply because of the worlds that they appreciate. I certainly have mountains that I like more because of stories I've read. I'm like, oh, that mountain range should absolutely have a dragon in it. Like, it needs that to be like that. And that's nothing wrong with my appreciation of nature. In fact, it's one of the things that drives me out to nature is I've read a lot of great books that happen in beautiful areas, and that I then go and enjoy those areas more because of the wonder my characters experienced in that, or because of the games I played that happened in beautiful settings. So we can experience that wonder and transfer it to the real world, but we can also escape unhealthfully. Not saying that doesn't happen. And we understand reality, that just because it isn't real doesn't mean it isn't true, and that we can see that greater truth and apply that through fictional, which, by the way, is why it matters so much that the stories you read and the movies you watch and the games you play reflect real truth. There are some games that deliberately distort that, and that is bad for our hearts and bad for our minds. And I mean, I'll take this public service opportunity to say, don't play Grand Theft Auto. At no age is it good to enjoy and celebrate a game where killing police officers is an active part of the plot. So, moving on. Parents, as we strive to raise kids who love God and use tech, it's intimidating to look at this next stage of life and think about what academics may look like for them. When you're thinking about college, consider George Fox University for your children because of three things. First, it's going to give you a more intimate, known environment where they have a focus on being known personally, academically, and spiritually. Your child will grow in their faith. 93% of undergrad students at George Fox last year, through the 2025 academic year, said that being at George Fox has helped them grow in their relationship with Jesus. We also want them to grow academically, which means being a part of a university with rigorous academic standards and opportunities to be engaged. They have a nationally recognized engineering, nursing, and education programs, as well as chances to study abroad here within the U.S. and then internationally. And finally, personally, to be part of a vibrant campus atmosphere where you can play intramural sports or part of their NCAA Division III athletic programs with 23 sports available. The goal here is to go to a place that's going to support your goals, not try to make you support theirs. To have that goal be to raise you up to be all God's called you to be, and to truly equip your young person with in my case, my sons or my daughter, to love God, and then from their love of God to go wherever God has called them. And that includes being equipped with a degree that'll help them do that, to be missionally equipped, to love and serve others, to lead where God has planted them, and to know the gospel for themselves, to be able to share it with others. So George Fox University is an amazing resource for our kids, for our community here in the Northwest, and for anyone who's looking to raise up a young person who can love God and from that, love others. 3, we are less likely as nerds to be tied to a typical grind for success. And I say typical grind because, again, there's an underbelly here where we can pursue meaningless goals for a feeling of success in whatever alternate world we have. But because we've journeyed a lot in fictional worlds, there is a reality and an understanding of reality that, man, my purpose is not just to go out and do more. It's not just to go achieve success and get through the grind and get the good grades so that I can get the good job, so I can have a good paycheck, so I can have kids who can go to school and get the good grades, get the good job. Like they see down the line far enough. Most of these young people have experienced, if they're a gamer or nerd, they've experienced some level of elation at success. And then that emptiness that comes from achieving your goals. You finished the book. You finished the game, you beat the boss, you did the thing you'd set your mind to and achieved greatness at, and then you'd move on and you have to set a new goal, which is everyone's experience in sports and in work and in school and in anything else. Like you get the achievement and it's great and it does show that you worked hard and reached your goal, but didn't change who you were. And young people with games and with shows and with these investments in fantastical worlds, they've achieved what they believe is a high level of success. And yet they are going to realize that it doesn't change who they are. And that's important for us to realize. All right. When I say this, I mentioned Tolkien. And actually, we're going to split this into a 2-part series because I can already tell we're too deep for me to do well on the second part. So we're going to end just on what we do well as gamers today. All right. So Tolkien says this. This is his argument in support of fairy tales, actually. That's what the essay he's writing is. But his argument is capital E, escape. That this is a positive thing. It's something adults need to work on, to not get so focused on the small r reality, the facts right in front of us, but instead to lift our eyes and to see the wonder of God and his greater plan and goodness. And he says, I have claimed that escape, capital E, is one of the main functions of fairy stories. And since I do not disapprove of them, it is plain that I do not accept the tone of scorn or pity with which escape, quotes, is now so often used, a tone for which the uses of the word outside literary criticism give no warrant at all. In what the misusers are fond of calling capital R real life, escape is evidently, as a rule, very practical and maybe even heroic. In real life, it is difficult to blame it unless it fails. In criticism, it would seem to be worse the better it succeeds. Evidently, we are faced by a misuse of words and also by a confusion of thought. Why should a man be scorned if, finding himself in prison, he tries to get out and go home? Or if he cannot do so, he thinks and talks about other topics than jailers and prison walls. The world outside has become no less real because the prisoner cannot see it. And I want to pause here. Escape in the capital E, is the ability to get beyond the reality in front of us and see the greater reality of God's wonder and creation and joy and beauty. And he says, why, if I read a fairy story and I see God's creative beauty in this story, why do you mock me as someone who's deserting reality? Whereas you would celebrate in real life if someone was stuck in a prison and trapped in the confines of stone walls and prison guards, if that person successfully got away. So in the metaphorical sense, we don't want people to look beyond the life right in front of them, stick to the grind and get the work done and keep working hard, never look up. But in a physical entrapment, well, that would make sense that you'd be able to get away. So he's trying to say here, imagination is key to being a great adult, to being a great worshiper of God. And imagination leads us to the ability to escape. In fact, I would argue that imagination is key to our ability to have faith. Faith in a situation that God is good even when the situation is bad. I can't see that it's good, but I believe it is. Imagination to believe that someone has value even when they've made a mistake, or that I have value even when I've made a mistake. Because I know I've done something wrong, but does that mistake make me a mistake now? Or is there something true beyond what I can see and experience in this moment? And that is a key premise of faith, that something is true even though I don't see it. Even though I'm in the prison wall of my life or my own mind or my own choices, I can look to and remember God's goodness. I can aim for and try to get to, escape from the reality I'm currently experiencing, small r, to the greater eternal reality that God reflected by sending his own son, and that God invites us into by having a regular relationship with him and having his spirit live inside us. So this imagination, capital E, escape, is key. Kids do it naturally. They can live their lives flipping between the reality of the things you ask them to do, like brush your hair and, put your shoes on and eat your breakfast. And they can do those things and then pivot momentarily to imagination and wonder and play. My kids do it all the time. It's all happening simultaneously. Kids are awesome at it. We can learn from it. It is a faith piece for us to continue to get better at. But I want to get back to what Tolkien finishes with. He just said, we seem to be having a misunderstanding both of the words and of the way we're thinking, because we would never blame someone for escaping their own prison walls, or at least thinking about the home that they miss and the beauty that's happening outside them just because they can't see it. He goes on and says, in using escape in this way, the critics have chosen the wrong word, and what is more, they are confusing, not always by sincere error, the escape of the prisoner with the flight of the deserter. So effectively, that fairy stories may invent monsters that fly the air and dwell in the deep, but at least they do not try to escape from heaven or the sea. That there is a place God's planted us, and that we are confusing sometimes when our children are enamored with fantastical worlds or stories. We can say, you know what, it's not real, focus on reality. Reality is work and income and sickness and all these things that are true. But there is this greater piece, and Tolkien makes the argument very well if you want to read his whole essay on the bit. I'll put it in the show notes. But we misunderstand sometimes the escape of the prisoner, that we are trapped in the grind that we're not made for. This is not the life God called us to. He called us to a higher calling in his kingdom that we're going to see come on this earth, and that we sometimes see that best through imagination, through stories. You can think of it as simple as parables, where Jesus told a lot of fictional stories about individuals and situations that did not exist to prove his greater points, but then taken to the extent of, fables told with animals so kids can connect. There's still a right and wrong. There's still a lesson to be learned, but we can connect more easily in those situations. Sometimes pulling our country or our family out of the story itself makes it easier to process what's actually happening here. Because at the end of the day, we can be more amazed by God, because escape in its truest form turns our eyes to him and looks beyond our current problems. The downside is sometimes we are deserters. Instead of making us more present and more empathetic and more amazed, our escape is a capital or a lowercase e. And our nerddom, we give up our family and we give up our jobs, we give up our ministry, we give up our health in order to pursue at all costs this show, this game, this outlet. And it absolutely can become then now we're deserting rather than getting out of the prison of the lie of what gives us purpose. And instead we are pursuing at all cost this escape so we don't have to deal with the world that God put us in, which sets us up for our conversation on what nerds can struggle with. I hope this is encouraging and helpful. My hope then is, as you have a young person who is enamored with fantastical worlds, talk to them about that. If they are showing unhealthy fruit, like if it's not producing love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and gentleness and faithfulness and self-control, then remove it or take a step back or change the variety you're consuming, change the amount of time. It does need to produce good fruit. And just because it isn't real doesn't mean it isn't true. This would be a great time for you to pick up a good fantasy book and read it with your kid. If you've never read The Hobbit, I think I actually mentioned this last episode too, read The Hobbit. It's a delightful story and very well written, a great opportunity to enjoy an adventure together. And it's intense enough to be amusing, but not so intense that, your 6-year-old will have nightmares. So it's a nice mix of that. But Gladys Hunt's Honey for a Child's Heart, you can go in there too and pick lots of books that have great themes, stories, and writing. So I hope this is encouraging and helpful that you, if you're not a nerd, feel equipped to talk to your nerd spouse or your nerd children, or just to understand some of the environment that these people are living in, and that God can still be worshiped and properly set in their hearts as number one, and yet they can still appreciate these other things. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me, Nathan@gospeltech.net. If you like this ministry, would you tell others about it? Would you share this podcast with others? Would you donate? gospeltech.net/podcast. We produce a free podcast because of people like yourselves who make this work possible. I just did 6 talks in the last 2 weeks, and 4 of those 6 were donor supported, meaning the organization who asked me to come in could not pay the full amount. And so donors stepped in and allowed me to still do that work and say yes, and those organizations to get either their church members or their families or their staff training and resources so that they can raise kids who love God and use tech. So gospeltech.net/donate is how you can give. And then you can join us next week as we continue this conversation about how we can love God and use tech.